So we're skipping from HTML 0.A to 0.C. We're skipping 0.B. I found a few different resources here and there that talk about some of these old versions, but I haven't found any that talk about 0.B. I found several that both say some of the same things about 0.A and 0.C, but no 0.B. Now, not a whole lot was added in between version A and version C, so I'm guessing not a lot was added in B either, so I think it's alright even if we miss that one. So the first one to mention is plaintext, the plaintext element. Now the plaintext element would actually switch the way the document was being read. This isn't the same as like the XMP tag or the listing tag. This actually changed the way it worked. So like with the listing or the XMP elements, when you added on that closing tag at the end, it went back to reading HTML the way it normally did, ignoring white space, stuff like that. Plaintext isn't the same way. So I've put a plaintext element here inside of XMP tags so that way you can see the code. And then I've actually copied and pasted the same code outside of that XMP element so you can see it here. So this is what it actually looks like outside of the XMP element. It looks the same for the most part, but notice that this /plaintext is still showing. This tag didn't disappear because it didn't switch back to HTML. It doesn't read this as a way to close the plaintext. There is no way to close the plaintext once you've switched to it. The document is now a different type of document halfway through. I don't know why you would use that over XMP or over listing unless, I guess, say your whole document itself was just plaintext to begin with, and you might throw that at the very top of the document. Anyway, it's interesting, I suppose. The next one is next ID, and this doesn't work anymore. There's no way to really show you what it looks like for a couple reasons. One, what it did was sort of invisible. So in the previous videos, we talked about anchor elements, right? And we talked about giving things names, right? So an anchor name that you could then link to. What next ID did was it would create a name automatically for part of a page wherever you put this next ID element, and that name would be a number. And then if you put another one on there, it would be the next number up. So it would sequentially create IDs or names in your document that you could link to based on just a sequential series of numbers. They also added some heading tags. So we had heading tags already, but we had only 3 of them. This added heading tags 4, 5, and 6, and you can see the different sizes here. It gets fairly small. That actually is the end of the heading tags. They don't add any more at any point. So before the first official version of HTML was released, they'd already done all 1 through 6, and they never chose to add on anymore. Here's the address element, which it basically italicizes stuff. But it's not inline. It creates a block. And we can talk about that a little bit more later. But sort of like the heading tags, like you can't put the H5 tag next to the H4 tag. It's going to move it down automatically. It creates a block here across the horizontal, and things can't be side by side. The same thing is true of the address elements. That ampersand right here, it fits here. And I didn't put a paragraph tag or any sort of line break here in code that should cause it to move down here. It just moves down here automatically because the address element creates a block. It creates a block that goes all the way across, so it's not inline. And we'll talk about inline and block elements a little bit more later. The next one is the index elements, and it basically provided a little like input field on the page that people could search with, so then it would bring up other pages that have that search term in there. It doesn't work anymore. It was discontinued a long time ago, and it was kind of complex because it required the website to be programmed a certain way, and the server to be programmed a certain way, and your browser to be compatible, and it had quite a few requirements, so it was never quite perfect to begin with. It was a good idea, but it didn't really work well, and better solutions were created that replaced it. If you try using it now, nothing will show up in your code. A couple years ago, in some browsers, you could still have a little search field that would show up. It wouldn't do anything, but you could see it. As far as I'm aware, none of the current browsers even show it anymore. They just ignore the element. They added a dir element, which is for directory listing. It was basically another type of list, like the ordered list and the unordered list. It was one of those. Now, it's been sort of discontinued. They recommend you don't use it, but it still works. It basically just renders, though, now like an unordered list. There was also the menu element, which is also basically an unordered list. The idea was that your lists, like unordered or ordered lists, would be for things that were not interactive. So maybe if you were actually making a recipe or something and it might list out the ingredients, you wouldn't necessarily want those to be interactive. Or maybe you would, but I mean, for the most part, probably not. This was intended more if you actually wanted those to be linked. So you actually had a menu that you could click on the different list items and actually go to different pages or different sections of a page. That was sort of the idea. As far as the way it loads now, it looks just like a regular list, and that's it actually. They didn't add a whole lot from point A to point C. The next version does have a few neat things that we'll talk about when we get into that, and after that one, it might be worth going back and modifying our previous page that we were working on.